Hey guys, what's up? This is Owen Shields for RunnerOnce.com, and I am here with Slahser. Hello,
Oh,
aka Hackpod here. This is part 4 of his deep run in this Zoom $11, wasn't it?
yes.
$11. If you haven't checked out the other parts, you can find them either on his YouTube page or our YouTube page. So there are three parts before this. This is part 4. Go check the other ones out first, and then come back and have a look at this one. If you've already watched them, then stay right here.
And if people are wondering why I'm sometimes looking down or away, it's because I have my notepad that I'm sometimes taking notes when Owen he drops his gold nuggets.
I try my best. Okay, so this is the hand after we finished in part 3. And let's crack on. So 23 bigs. I see myself doing, well, I was going to say a lot of reshoving here, but everyone's folded to us. So yeah, just going to open for a normal raise and probably not folding. It's going to be difficult to fold me off this hand, but they don't try. Okay. Ace Jack off. Folds to us again. Easy open. Easy folds. Queen 9 suited. We open 3x.
Yeah,
I think this is okay if you're kind of planning to just go with the hand. I think you could also limp here. You can also you can just open jam. This is going to be a profitable open jam. I think in Zoom, I might prefer to raise a little bit smaller, so make it like 2.5x here.
Yeah.
And to fold to a jam. And the reason is, if you think about the dynamics of Zoom and how Zoom works, how many low stakes players are going to have auto-clicked fold here?
Maybe 25% or something.
Well, 25% is a decent extra amount of folds, because usually blind versus blind you're not going to get that many folds, but I feel like those extra folds that you get from playing Zoom makes this worth, and just playing your entire small blind range as a smaller raise size and play a little bit tighter versus rejams, because players are less likely to be bluffing in Zoom specifically. As played, if we were playing a normal tournament, I'm pretty happy to be limping this. You can limp call this. I think it's a little bit too weak to limp jam, but you can also pretty happily call a shove with this hand. I think people are going to think that's really bad if they're playing low stakes tournaments, but if you think about the hands that people are generally jamming in this situation, it's going to be low pairs, so we're flipping a lot. I'm not saying that you have to be limp calling it if they jam, but I don't think it's as bad as people would actually think it is. I could see the surprise on your face there when I said it's fine to call versus a jam. It's just like your equity with a hand like this, a suited 2 high cards is pretty good versus players' ranges when you take out aces, kings, that kind of stuff, which people are generally not going to jam in this situation.
Yeah.
When you take the top of their range, it's okay.
I think my strategy right now would be to limp it and then call a 3x, and just also how I'm thinking about small blind right now is just more in terms of equity protection. So just to be able to see a flop and not just 3x and then he jams and I lose all my equity. So.
Yeah, I think. I would be, if I 3x here and someone jams, I'm just going to call it off with this. If I choose to 3x this, because it's going to be one of the better hands in my range to do it.
Yeah.
And if they've got all the low pairs and stuff like that, then we actually do pretty well with a suited big 2 like this. But like Queen 9 off, if I 3x it here, is going to be a fold. Queen 9 suited a call. Okay. He just folds, doesn't he? Yeah, he just folds. Pocket 8s. We open for 18. Off 18. Get a flop which favours his range, really. Well, it favours ours in the fact that we have Jacks plus, and he doesn't have Jacks plus. But in terms of what hits this flop more often, it's going to be our opponent. I don't think our hand is quite strong enough to be bet getting it in with here. If I had any 10x or any overpair, I think we can just bet get it in fine. I think in the last video I was talking about how when SPR is low, stack to pot ratio, for those of you who don't know what SPR is, then it's fine to get it in, and SPR is about 3 and a bit here, which is quite low. So any top pair is fine to get in here. This is the type of hand that I want to be checking behind here. Yes, we need a lot of protection, but at these stack sizes, when our opponent gets to shove over the top of our raise a lot, then we want to be have some hands in our check back range that we can just call with. So I wouldn't be just like... I would probably be getting rid of my pure bluffs on this flop. So I would be pure bluffing or going for value. So if I had like a hand like ace 2 of... maybe not even ace high. But any kind of hand that you could think that would just be a pure bluff here with no kind of backdoor equity, or very little backdoor equity, I would use as a bluff on this flop, because I know
I like that.
I'm fine to bet fold it. And he also has quite a difficult time continuing with a lot of his range still. Whereas stuff that has equity, so any kind of, gut shot or anything that I had here, Jack 9 suited, stuff like that I would have in this situation, I don't want to be betting that stuff because I get folded off it so easily in this kind of spot. And 8 kind of fits in well with that range. So a medium strength hand that we can check back and definitely take some heat with. So we bet here. If you want to bet, I think you want to make it pretty small in this spot. You do make it quite small. I would probably go even smaller. And luckily he folds in this situation. And I don't think it's the worst bet in the world, especially if you're going to go for a small sizing, but that would be how I would be thinking about this hand based on stack sizes.
Yes. Ace King. I don't think I'm folding here with 22 big blinds.
Great.
Though when on the gun min raise, it must be aces, so maybe I should fold. Just kidding.
Maybe.
I think I just jam here.
The jamming is the only action here, and most of my range is going to be played for a jam here. I am going to have some flat calls that I want to play, and especially, I'm going to want to kind of balance that out with having some aces and kings in my flatting range as well. But a hand like ace king does so well shoving versus calling that shove is definitely the play that we want to be making here.
Yes.
And the reason is that it's fairly obvious that aces and kings, they retain their equity on most flops pretty well versus our opponent's range, but ace king on lots of flops, hits equity goes massively down versus his range. Because, if he has 6-7 suited and the flop comes like queen, jack, 7, we're still doing pretty badly against him. Whereas right now we're doing really well against that hand. And if we just get pure folds with ace king, I'm always happy. Okay, so we take that one down. Pocket 10s, we open under the gun, that's fine. Get flat called. We get a pretty ropey flop for our hand. For our range, this isn't actually the worst hand for our range. The reason being that when you get these monotone flops like these, the in-position player who flats is generally going to have a higher amount of suited hands in their range. If you think about it, if you're opening, perhaps not in this spot because you're opening under the gun, but generally the person who calls in position is going to have a higher amount of suited hands. However, in this position, the suited hands that he's going to call with, in general, are also going to be in our range, and the board blocks a ton of his suited hands that he wants to call. So the fact that it's an ace-jack flop kind of makes me want to make a small bluff at this flop, because if we check, basically we're giving up on the hand, because we don't really get to call any bets at any point in the hand, because it's going to be so difficult for us to continue it, especially with our our stack size here being only just over 3x pot. So I would prefer just to make a small bet here and fold out, even if we fold out all his like 2s through 10s, well, we're not folding out 2s, but his 3s through 10s, we're taking away his potential bluffs, which he can certainly turn like pocket 3s, pocket 4s, all those hands into a bluff later on, if not on the flop. So I kind of prefer betting very small within my entire range in this spot, because it puts such a lot of pressure on the hands. Like, even if he has like king, queen, no club, yes, he may call, but he might decide just to check it down after the call, which kind of takes away his bluffing opportunities. Whereas if we check, I feel like we're going to get bluffed at some point in the hand, and we very rarely get to showdown. Okay, so we check, and this is kind of what happens way too often, I think, in this situation when we check flop. Okay, and I mean, we're going to have a lot of hands that we actually want to bet small there. We're going to have ace king, we're going to have like king queen with a club, all those kind of hands. So it's not like our range is just pure bluffs. We have plenty of very strong hands there as well. Pocket 7s. I'm not overly happy with a 3x from early position. I still feel like we should probably be shoving, but I think calling is okay as well. Especially versus a 3x from early position. The problem is, like, at these lower stakes tournaments, pre-flop sizing can be a tell, and players opening for 3x can quite often have a stronger range.
Yep.
But then other people can't. They just open 3x with everything. So it's quite difficult, especially in a Zoom tournament, to know. And I might just play it safe and flat call here, but I think shoving will be absolutely fine as well. We call. We get a bet and a call, which is great. At this stage, I mean, we don't want to fold anyone off anything because our stack size is so low. If we're much deeper stacked, raising this flop makes some sense. The reason being that if we're much deeper stacked, it makes it easier to get stacks in. But we're not going to struggle here because the pot size is already over what our stack size is. So it's not going to be difficult on any turn, any river, to get our entire stack in. And also, if someone has like pocket 8s that they call here, we don't particularly want to shove here and give them an option of folding. If someone has a hand like ace king with the ace, or ace queen with the ace of spades here, we don't particularly want to fold out that hand by check shoving here. What we'd prefer to do is just check call and allow them to both get bets in on the turn, as opposed to sometimes we're going to jam here and yellow Hannah is going to have pocket jacks and they're going to jam over the top, and then this guy folds his ace queen, which could have potentially hit an ace or a queen on the turn. So it doesn't look like too much of a difference between jamming here and calling, but I think there is a pretty big difference. So you jam, and that's exactly what happens. And he ends up having jacks. Oh, jacks! I called it somehow. But yeah, I think you just want to play it that way to get everyone's chips, because your hand is so strong that even if people have flush draws and stuff, well, on this they were dead on the turn when they had a flush draw, but they didn't know that.
I guess if we had 2 pair, we're always shoving to protect our hand.
Yeah, because 2 pair is a lot more vulnerable.
Yeah, okay.
When someone has like aces versus our 2 pair, then they have 3 4s plus 2 aces, which is 5 outs. When they have aces versus our 7s, they have 2 outs, so they have 2.5 times as many outs when we have 2 pair. If they have that specific hand, so it's difficult to beat pocket 7s when we flop a 7, even on this dynamic board.
It's interesting.
So we just want to keep as many people in the pot as possible. If we were like 5-way or something like that, I could see myself playing. No, I still think I would just be calling just to try and get as many chips in as possible with my stack size.
Okay.
Yeah. You just want to think, how can I get as much value out of this as possible?
Yeah.
Okay, queens, very nice. We get a call from early position. You make it 7x. Maybe a little bit big. I kind of want to keep people around. So I still think probably I would be going 5x.
I think also when... Like, we aren't that deep. We're 50 big blinds deep, so I can just make it 5x, and the stack to pos will still be...
It'll be fine,
so
13 in there on the pot, and on the flop, and he'll have 30, so it's like 2.4 or 2.3, 2.4 SPR, which is very easy to get stacks in just on the flop. There's no reason to make it so big.
Yeah. 5, 6 big blinds, and then it kind of sucks when they both fold to it.
But that's gonna happen when you make it so big. That's gonna happen a lot.
Yeah,
they're just gonna fold. Whereas if you make it 5 bigs, they can probably convince themselves to call with like a 10-9 suited.
But let's say I have ace king offsuit here. I would prefer making it 7x and make them fold like a lot of hands.
I'd still prefer just to make it 5x, because if you make it 5x, you're still getting to call hands like ace 7 offsuit or ace 7 suited, which you get a lot of value out of post flop when you both flop an ace. So there's plenty of reasons to make it smaller, because you have very few bluffs out of this position.
Yeah, that's
so
true.
That actually means that you can go bigger. But if you think about it versus the player pool, if you go bigger, you're just getting too many folds with your range. So I prefer to keep some of them in and have a smaller pot post flop when they do continue.
Sure.
We get another limp under the gun. I'm absolutely fine isolating here. However, we do have some stacks behind that we're going to have to call off first as if they shove. So if I make it sort of 4x here, which is what I would probably make it, I'm going to have to call these two, which is fine. We have a hand that is okay to do that. If the 27 big blind stack shoves, I will be folding. Limping along is reasonable as well, but I prefer an isolation, especially in a lower stakes tournament where people are going to be limping way too many hands. So this guy could be limping like, I've seen lots of people limping like 9-6 suited here, or like 10-8 offsuit. Tons of hands that they really should have no way of playing in those situations. They just stick it in for a limp. So we want to push our value versus those hands, and isolating him is the best way to push our value, because this is a kind of hand where a queen jack offsuit, it flops well with top pairs and stuff, but once you start going multi-way, it's not so good. It's kind of the same as like ace jack off, in that it flops top pairs really well, but the more players who are in the pot, its value decreases, because obviously the more players there are in the pot, the less valuable top pair is.
Yeah. Because
it's just much more likely that someone has some really weird 2 pair. So when you limp along, you have to be really careful of that. So especially in a limp pot with like 4 or 5 players, top pair is a mediocre hand. and has to be played very carefully.
So if we had like pocket fours here, would you prefer just like limping
I
behind?
think limping is fine in general. If I had pocket fours in this situation, I would have raised, and that is because of the 2 stack sizes behind me.
Okay, so we raise them, we call them off.
Yeah, we raise and we call them off, but if we limp, we have to fold to their shove, and they're just that much more likely to shove on us than if they had like 20 big blinds or 30 big blinds.
Okay.
But yeah, I think the low pocket pairs work for a much better call here than this, or even a hand like ace-2 suited. Be fine just limping along here if you want to. 6-7 suited, those kind of hands that do play better multi-way. They're not going to flop top pair a lot, but you know, when they do flop, they flop really hard, and can win really big pots. Like a hand like Queen Jack off, you're going to win a lot of small pots very often, and if you don't play it carefully, you're going to lose a lot of big pots. Whereas a hand like 6-7 suited is going to lose a lot of small pots, but generally win the big pots, and that's what you got to kind of think about. And yeah, playing Queen Jack off, I prefer to be up against just one opponent, especially versus a weaker opponent. Okay, everyone checks. I probably bet here, by the way, on the flop. So we have Queen High right now. Both players have shown pretty weak. A fair amount of weakness. A limp pre-flop, no raise from the big blind when it limps round to him, and then they both check flop. I'm just going to take a stab at this of like 1.5 to 2 big blinds, and it's going to work well enough at the time. And the times that it doesn't work, we have a backdoor straight draw, we have a backdoor flush draw, and we have 2 overs to any sort of random 6x, 3x, or mid pair that they could have. So we still have a lot of equity versus their ranges, even if we are behind. The only times that we're not doing well is when they have a king, really. And usually they would bet when they have a king. So it's just a spot where we make a ton of money by betting often. But checking, we just kind of allow our opponents to bluff. I think the bet is fine on the turn. I think you could actually bet smaller. I don't think you need to go for that sizing. If any opponent was a thinking player, they should have realised that if you had a flush draw, you would have bet it on the flop. This is a spot where I would be seriously thinking about check raising you with anything.
Wow, you could really own me there if you did that.
But yeah, I think if you bet on the flop, and especially if you bet on the flop, you get to bet this card as a bluff on the turn every time, because 1, you have a good blocker, and 2, if they have a 6x or a 3x now, their hand looks a lot worse. So I definitely would have played that spot a little bit differently. Pocket 5s, just calling, no reason to do anything else, and no reason to continue in this hand whatsoever. Yeah, that's fine. Interesting to see what this guy checks twice. Ace-6 of diamonds. I think he should probably be making a small bet at some point in that hand. Yeah, if he doesn't bet flop, he should be betting turn for sure. He just folds out every lower pair, and that's what you got to think about, when you're betting or when you're deciding what to bet as a bluff. When you're bluffing, what you're trying to achieve is to get better hands to fold. And when he has this ace-6 suited, ace-6 of diamonds in this spot, he gets so many better hands to fold that it just makes such a lot of sense to bet. And even when he doesn't, he still has equity on a river card. Yeah, don't like how he played his ace-6 suited there. Okay, pocket 4s, yeah, fine to call along with. Everyone's going to play pretty straightforward here, I'd imagine, so... Or just jam it in with the gut shot. Fine. I guess he knows he's getting there. Ace-2 suited, I like the open. Get a call. So this kind of flop where I am betting very frequently and very, very small. And it's kind of for obvious reasons that, like, we have all the better ace-x in our range because he probably jams like ace-king, ace-queen. We have more ace-x because our range is going to be, probably somewhere between 12 and 22%, depending on the player. And that range versus the big blinds range, which will probably be somewhere about, in general, is going to be fall in the region of about somewhere between 35 and 45% here. We just have a lot more ace-x. And he has so many hands in his range that are just like, 6, 7 of hearts here, which just has to fold. So we get to bet our entire range very small, and there's nothing that he can do about it. The other thing about betting very small here is if we bet ace-2 very small here, we get to keep him in with some hands that are doing really badly against us, like 10-jack of diamonds and things like that we actually want him to call with. Checking back, I think, doesn't make the greatest amount of sense. Yeah, we can get some bluffs, but I don't think this is a spot where people are going to bluff too often. I think it's too kind of obvious a check back if you have ace-x, because, like, what does your opponent have? But that's the whole point of us betting small, is when we do have ace-x, it allows our opponent to also try and do some funky stuff if they want to. I mean, his name is Shenanigans, so he could get up to some shenanigans.
Yeah.
He checks, and then on this turn, I would still be betting very small here if I checked back flop, for kind of the same reasons. Even though the board looks slightly more scary now, we still don't need much protection, or pretty much any protection. So we don't need to go particularly big. And when he checks twice, it's unlikely for us to be able to get much good value. So yeah, I think I would be going very small here again, like 1/3 pot.
Yeah.
We open ace-queen suited, get a call from a 20 big blind stack. Get a flop which favours imposition's range. I think just without any backdoors, I think we should be check. It depends on his bet size. If he bets small, we should be check calling once he goes over half pot. I'm fine just check folding this. Exploitatively, it's good. GTO, it's bad, I'd imagine. So we probably should be defending flop with this combination. But I think the problem is that we don't get to check call flop, check call turn. So without any backdoors, if I had backdoor spades here, I could definitely see myself check calling and playing accordingly from there. But without spades, I think, just check fold is fine. Okay, pocket queens. We get a call from the big blind. If I'm going to have any hand to check back here, pocket queens would be it. I think betting is actually okay on this board because I think we get a lot of continues. And if I bet this, I'm not betting it to fold. The reason being that we are going to run into King X a pretty high amount of the time when he check raises, but we also run into 10X and a ton of draws, which of those draws we actually do pretty well in blocking. So like if he has a Jack 9 here, we block 2 of his 8 outs, which works out pretty well for us. And I think people just get it in here with 10X enough of the time that betting to get it in here is okay. Betting to fold here is very bad. If you're going to bet to fold here, you should just be checking behind. Which is what we do. He bets one big blind. Am I tempted to raise? Slightly. But I think we just call. The problem is when he bets this one big blind is... Do you see people do it with a king? Sometimes. But yeah, I kind of prefer just to like call and then plan to call river as well. Because when he bets one big blind, we raise to 4 and then he jams, we have to call. Which I'm not sure if we want to be creating that kind of pot. And when we raise, like, what do we get value from? Are we getting value from 10x? Probably.
Yes. Flush draw.
Flush draw, yes. But is it not better to play a cheap pot with a mediocre hand? Well, I mean, our hand is better than mediocre, but it's still a medium strength hand. So I kind of prefer to play in spots like this where his range is really kind of undefined due to this bet. He doesn't tell us anything with this bet. He could have a king, he could have a flush draw. I'd kind of prefer just to play it safe and not risk, because basically when we're raising here, we have to be raising here not to fold this hand. And we're going to be risking 2/3 of our stack with this hand, potentially, because he could easily shove on us. So I prefer just to play like a little bit more defensively and kind of a bit safer and not risking a lot of my tournament life, because that's the one thing that you really need to be concerned about when you're playing a tournament is your tournament life. Now that doesn't mean that you don't get into, situations where it's 50-50 and stuff like that, but you try and avoid them as much as possible.
But why do we have to, if we raise this, why do we have to call it off if he jams? I think
what
we
I'm
probably should.
Is that, like, if you choose to raise this hand, you should be choosing it to raise to call off, because we beat all his bluffs and we beat his 10x. The only stuff we don't beat is kings, or if he has a set. If he has like a hand, if he has 2 pair 10-7 now, we beat it. So if you're raising this hand and then folding it, you're actually folding yourself off a lot of equity.
But the thing is, of course I don't know, but I think that he's not going one big blind to jam with a flush draw. Like, I don't think
Why not?
that. I just don't think, like, I think the way just my general experience playing a lot of hands micro stakes is that people are not playing flush draws aggressively usually, like you probably should. So yeah, but yeah, like if he can do this and then jam with a flush draw or 10, then of course we have to call.
Okay, think about this hand from his perspective. So you open pre-flop, you have decently strong range to open.
Yeah.
And then this flop came, king 10-7. Now, if he's a player who plays low stakes and has a low stakes kind of mindset, what is he going to imagine that you do with pretty much every single strong hand on this board?
Yeah, bet.
You're going to bet flop. Now, if you don't bet flop, but then bet when the king comes, he's going to imagine that you could perhaps have one strong hand here, which is pocket kings, which you might slow play. So he could easily think that you are just messing about with him here.
True.
And just think that his 10x is actually good. And that's the reason why you can't raise fold queens here.
Okay.
Because it's kind of... I'm not sure what level thinking you would put that on, but like first to second or something like that. Yeah. It's just like how the hand played out. You really shouldn't have too many king X, especially in his eyes here.
Yeah.
Okay, and he calls and he checks. I'm pretty glad that you actually went for value here. And yeah, he ends up with a 10. So I think he actually played it okay with how you checked behind. And especially at low stakes, like you don't see people value betting enough here with a hand like pocket queens. You see way too much checking behind here, and I'm pretty glad to see that you did actually go for value with this hand.
Yes, I'm glad I did. I think, like, at least we saw that he didn't jam a 10 there. But of course, that just one hand doesn't tell us that much. But I just this is just, I guess, very exploitative. That like when he bets like this, I feel like he might have some kings, but I think mostly it's 10x or it's flush draw. It's some hand that wants to get some like cheap extra card or
and I think that's right, but it's still like if you're gonna raise queens here, you still have to call it off if he's gonna have any bluffs whatsoever. If you could say for certain, and that's the problem with poker, you can almost say for certain, especially playing these Zoom tournaments. If you can say for certain he never has a draw here, then you get to fold your queens because he always has a king.
But I might then be okay with raising and calling it off. Then because I don't know. I think the turn raise is good against his side, against what he does, compared to what I read into it.
Yeah.
And all right, and then I'm actually okay with then raise turn and then call it off. Would you be okay with that play if I raise and then call it off if he jams?
Yeah, I'm fine with raise calling it off if he jams.
Yeah.
I'm just not fine with raising and then, because if you're going to choose to raise raise and then fold, you should be choosing much weaker hands to do it with.
Yeah. I think that might be. I guess that's what maybe one league that maybe I do maybe 2 big hero folds.
Yeah, I think
both pre-flop and post-flop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just start getting it in those kind of situations where you're a little bit on the fence, like, oh, should I? Just start clicking the call button, and you'll be surprised to see how often they turn up with like pocket 5s when their ranges should have been like 10s plus.
Yeah, I think also, but I think in micro stakes, people are generally underbluff a lot of spots. And I don't know.
I think there's different micro stakes players, and that's the point. Is that like there's definitely players out there who do underbluff.
Yeah.
And I have a feeling that you might be one of those guys who would probably underbluff spots. And one of the reasons why I think you think that other people underbluff is because you do it.
I underbluff.
And there's a lot of players out there who are the complete opposite to you, who just like massively overbluff in situations that they really shouldn't do.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's a really important thing to remember going forward, is to make a distinction between how you play and how the field plays. Because you are not the field, you are just a one individual playing.
Yeah, that's actually one of the things that I've been working on lately, is to try to find more bluffs, but try to be more aggressive.
Yeah. And the more aggressive you are, like, it doesn't matter in a Zoom tournament because people aren't going to have stats on you and not really going to see you, but the more aggressive you are, the other side to being more aggressive is that you get paid off in more spots more often. If you're just playing tight, and making loads of these pre-flop folds and, hero folding, or whatever, when you start showing aggression, people are just going to get out of the way. You're never going to get paid off. So it's like a fine balance that you've got to find. Pretty difficult to do, but it's worth it when you get there.
Yeah.
Okay, we will finish up here. This has been Owen Shields and Slahser.
Yes.
And we'll be back with part 5 very soon. Thanks for watching, everyone, and see you soon.